and welcome back to the debate. We're talking about, of course, the Prime Minister's speech at the UNGA and the way that Pakistan's stance has been put forward by the caretaker Prime Minister. A number of issues, of course, of regional and global importance have been highlighted by the Prime Minister. And it's important, of course, in terms of what its impact has been. And we're going to be, of course, talking about a number of these issues, many of which we've already also touched upon, including, of course, issues such as that of terrorism and peace in Afghanistan, issues such as that of Islamophobia, of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and then of course regarding the economic situation of the country as well, and then of course climate change. And a number of these have been talked about in terms of the direction and steps needed by the Prime Minister, and we're going to be taking a look at each one of them in detail. And we'll start off with what the Prime Minister spoke about at the UNGA regarding issues in Afghanistan and how peace is imperative in Afghanistan for Pakistan and the world as well, and the way that there needs to be support and action, especially in terms of protecting Afghanistan soil to be used against any other territory, including Pakistan. And so let's take a look at what the Prime Minister said about Afghanistan before we continue.
Peace in Afghanistan is a strategic imperative for Pakistan. Pakistan shares the concern of international community with respect to Afghanistan, particularly the rights of women and girls. Yet we advocate continued humanitarian assistance to a destitute Afghan population. Pakistan's first priority is to prevent and counter all terrorism from and within Afghanistan. Pakistan condemns the cross-border terrorist attacks against Pakistan by the TTP, Daesh, and other groups operating from Afghanistan. We have sought Kabul's support and cooperation to prevent these attacks. However, we are also taking necessary measures to end this externally encouraged terrorism.
Well, you heard what the Prime Minister said about Afghanistan, that this has been an important issue. And Dr. Jamil, I'll take your opinion on this in terms of course, what Pakistan has been saying, especially its expectation from Kabul and, of course, the Afghanistan Taliban regime in terms of being able to exercise the kind of actions that are needed to protect its soil to be used against any other territory, and then, of course, uphold its own commitments. And I want to then understand, given what we've seen so far in terms of the response or lack thereof, what exactly will then be Pakistan's strategy moving forward, and how far can we push, and how can we achieve what we want from the Taliban regime in Afghanistan? Dr. Jamil, are you with us?
Responsibilities.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I'm with you. And Pakistan has twofold responsibilities. One, that Pakistan and Afghanistan, and of course the tribal belt of Pakistan and Afghanistan, we have our centuries-old relations. Can you hear me? Right, centuries-old relation. So at the vertical level, we have to really let the world know, because there are Security Council resolutions binding Afghan Taliban in terms of controlling the terrorist cells and terrorist activities, which could affect the other countries and other part of the world. So that is their obligation under the UN resolution. That is one aspect, but Pakistan can press upon horizontally by utilizing its bilateral relation, and vertically by relying on the multilateral instruments such as the United Nations Security Council resolution. And of course, Doha Agreement is a bilateral between the United States and the Taliban, but then the ingredients related to the terrorist and terrorist organization and terrorist cell is also reflected in the Security Council resolution passed in August 2021 and again September in 2001. So therefore, Pakistan has to really deal with Taliban very delicately, and Pakistan has to engage with Taliban more, because Taliban has on pressure on their on themselves, because Taliban and TTP and some of those cells and some of those terrorist groups, they have been working and they've been fighting shoulder to shoulder with Afghan Taliban. Afghan Taliban and those cells, they have their or cross-fertilization in terms of the workers and fighters are concerned. So it becomes very hard for the Afghan Taliban to clamp down 100% on them. And that realization, world cannot have it. But Pakistan being its neighbor, Pakistan being the victim of terrorism, Pakistan who has been facilitating Taliban as their brothers, they understand it quite well. Having said so, Pakistan also is a member of United Nations. Pakistan also has to respect and regard the international laws such as the UN Charter and all the Security Council resolutions which has been passed for and against Taliban. So having that in our mind moving forward, I think with what Pakistan's Prime Minister has said at the Security Council as at the General Assembly session, I think our missions and our diplomats can take it from there and start ironing out the environment and the opinion of the world in terms of what cross-border terrorism is and how Pakistan is affected and how it is not only Pakistan's problem, but according to the reports of the UN Security Council monitoring group, 2 or 3 reports, which are very vivid, very candid about what is happening in Afghanistan and how the TTP is crossing the border and attacking Pakistan.
That's important, Jamil Saab, in terms of course, what we expect, not just from Afghanistan, but the international community as well. And I want to understand, Farrukh, when the Prime Minister talks about condemning terrorism in all its forms, of course, this is something that perhaps in the theoretical sense, we see the international community agreeing with, but there is a lot of discussion in terms of what is understood and how exactly different countries choose to respond to the different forms of terrorism. And then I want to understand, given that issue, how exactly will then the way that the international community is able to facilitate Pakistan in its own fight against terrorism vis-a-vis Afghanistan, will be able to collaborate or will be able to extend support in terms of the issues that we're facing, especially in our interactions with the Afghanistan Taliban regime.
Right. Thank you, Sana, for this question. The first part essentially is very important. Remember that when you talk about quality of terrorism, the kind of terrorism that is going on, because before 9/11 there were 2 countries that were actually talking a lot about terrorism because they were once accused of similar things themselves. Now, one was India, one was Israel, and both these countries were facing challenge from Muslims, no one else. Because of that, somehow an effort was made that terrorism should be connected to Islam only, but other shades should be ignored, right? And that continued for quite some time. We have seen umpteen books now being written at how that kind of approach has actually fed into right-wing extremism in other religions or communities. For example, in America, we saw January 6th, white supremacists actually attacking their own parliament, their own Congress. Similarly, what is happening in India is also an example of how terrorism, particularly saffron terrorism, can actually continue to grow and pose a threat not only to our country but international community. So the time is ripe for the world community to understand that if you are going to talk about terrorism, there can't be any distinction between shades of terrorism. Terrorism is what kills people, which terrorizes people, and you have to actually appreciate all shades of it, right? Now, regarding Afghanistan, I think at this moment the circumstances in Afghanistan are strange. Afghanistan sort of has fell through the cracks, and it is off the international map. No country actually recognizes the current government in Afghanistan. UN doesn't have their representation, so that becomes a problem. And we have seen that the way West actually, while pulling out of Afghanistan, actually left behind weapons, and then Afghan army also just left the weapons and ran away. Because of that, terrorism has been using the worst kind of weapons possible. So now it is Pakistan's job to keep on drawing attention to it. Unfortunately, I think it will take some time. Yeah. Immediately, you're not going to have that kind of impact.
All right. Another important issue, of course, that was raised by the caretaker Prime Minister was with reference to Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And we're going to talk about that in further detail as well. But also, let's take a look at what the PM had to say about this and the impact it created.
Kashmir is the key to peace between Pakistan and India. The Jammu and Kashmir dispute is one of the oldest issues on the agenda of the Security Council. India has evaded implementation of the Security Council's resolutions, which call for the final disposition of Jammu and Kashmir to be decided by its people through UN-supervised plebiscite. Since 5th August 2019, India has deployed 900,000 troops in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir to impose the final solution for Kashmir. The UN Security Council must secure the implementation of its resolution on Kashmir. The UN Military Observer Group for India and Pakistan should be reinforced. Global powers should convince New Delhi to accept Pakistan's offer of mutual restraint on strategic and conventional weapons.
Well, this is what the Prime Minister had to say. And Faisal, this is an important issue, of course, for Pakistan. And we've been reiterating that on every platform and every chance we get. And it's important that the world acknowledges and understands what's going on and also then acts on the UN Security Council resolutions, as was pointed out by the caretaker Prime Minister. But at the same time, of course, we know that so many years have passed and we haven't really achieved what was set in the UN Security Council resolution. So how impactful do you think this aspect is at the floor of the UNGA, where we're talking about UN Security Council resolutions that had value and substance, but unfortunately weren't able to fulfill the kind of objective that they wanted to and what they had hoped for, especially in terms of the huge number of people that are still suffering and still fighting for their right to self-determination.
Sana, it was very important, and more important was that Prime Minister Kakar, before he mentioned about Kashmir and how it is being treated at the hands of course, Indian illegally occupied forces, occupying forces, he did highlight that Pakistan wants a peaceful relation with all of the countries, and he categorically said with India, of course, Pakistan seeks peace, and all of the problems should be resolved on the negotiation table. And then later on, of course, he highlighted the facts about Kashmir, which was obviously, you know, it was a sort of reiterating the facts, because what we have seen that if since few years, India has been portraying as if especially after the abrogation of 370 and 35A, they have been, you know, portraying to the world as if, you know, Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir was, of course, integral part of India, and somehow Pakistan had nothing to do with it, and on top, of course, they were claiming that Pakistan is the one that is, you know, occupying forces are present in the Azad Jammu and Kashmir. And I think this was quite important, highlighting in a way which was well received by, of course, the present leaders there as well. And reason being, I'm saying, because you know, highlighting the need of United Nations observing forces in both Pakistan and Indian side of the Kashmir, occupied Kashmir, it was much needed one, because he highlighted the fact that the you know, forces that were increased in Indian illegally occupied Kashmir right after abrogation of 370 and 35A, it has created a sort of you know, a zone which can be considered as the most militarized zone of the world. And of course, people day and night, they are suffering there. He highlighted their sufferings, and he highlighted the importance of why world must take a note of it, and Of course, the media should be present in, international media should be present in Indian illegally occupied Kashmir, and of course the military observers, they need to be there as well. This matter must be highlighted at the urgent, and the ultimate resolve of the conflict between, bilateral conflict between Pakistan and India is that of course it should be resolved through a plebiscite between in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, with the consent of the people of the Indian illegally occupied Kashmir. So I think it was extremely important to highlight at this hour, when of course the world is eyeing upon India related to their exporting terror to Canada the way they have done so in recent days. And of course there are different countries, including Australia, including New Zealand, including US and UK, all of them,
similar kind of
they are concerned about this fact as well. And of course the Americans and few of the parliamentarians from Canada, they are demanding that especially RSS should be declared as a terrorist organization, and any of the members having any sort of affiliation with the RSS living in abroad in these countries, they should be banned.
Right. Sana, I know that you have to go to the next segment, but very quickly I just wanted to add to what Faisal had said. I think this is the India's emperor has no clothes moment.
Yeah.
When India stands exposed, and I think that the world community is also paying heed. So it is opportune that the Prime Minister is drawing attention to this as well.
That's great, and that's of course what we hope to achieve. Another important aspect that the Prime Minister talked about is with regards to economy, and we've talked about earlier as well in terms of course, bringing in investment to Pakistan and the role of the SIFC. Let's hear what he had to say.
Pakistan government is committed to rapid economic recovery. We will stabilize our foreign exchange reserves in our currency, expand domestic revenues, and most importantly, mobilize significant domestic and external investment. Facilitation Council, SIFC, to expedite investment decisions. 28 projects have been identified in priority sectors: agriculture, mining, energy, and IT, for implementation in collaboration with Pakistan's partners. The second phase of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor has been initiated, covering railway, infrastructure, and manufacturing projects.
You heard what the Prime Minister had to say, and with regards to the way that he has highlighted different aspects on economy, we've been joined by Dr. Hakan Najib, Senior Economist on telephone line. Thank you very much, Dr. Hakan, for taking the time out and speak to us today. Of course, at the UNGA, it's an important aspect that was talked about by the caretaker Prime Minister, giving, of course, Pakistan's stance and presenting a picture to the world leaders as to what Pakistan is doing with regards to its economic challenges. But I want to understand your perspective on how well was the Prime Minister able to do that, especially in light of how the world perceives Pakistan in its current tough times, in its relationships with the IMF, in the way that the global indicators are impacting Pakistan's economy, and then of course the political changes within the country. At this point in time, how has the Prime Minister made it relevant and attractive for the world leaders to invest in Pakistan?
A couple of things. There's no doubt that the economy is in difficulty. I mean, and we are trying to sort that fact out to the best of our ability. But having said that, it is also true that something that was brought up was the climate challenge, due to which Pakistan, suffered a big loss due to the floods that we saw in Pakistan. At the same time, Pakistan is trying to grapple with the issue of completing the IMF program. We, as a nation, have now believed that we are steadfast on completing it. The last political government signed it. The caretakers are trying to follow through with it. But what is more important is now that we want to sort out our reform program, and we want to inculcate investment into the sphere of what we want to do in the coming years. I think the Prime Minister specifically talked about the SIFC. So I'm glad he told the world that we are serious to, wherever needed, bypass the cumbersome laws or regulations that might need to be bypassed. We are serious to showcase to the world that there are opportunities in agriculture, IT, and minerals in Pakistan. Whereas we stay steadfast on the reform process with the IMF, we want to do more on the reform process in terms of what we have showcased to the world. The smuggling aspect, the hoarding aspect, and having store of value instead of investments, dollar, bullion, gold, and other commodities. We've come hard on it. I think that message for me is very, very important. Pakistan has showcased to the world that we want to exert the writ of the state, and the writ of the state is not weak. When it wants to curb across the border smuggling, or whether it wants to make sure that there is no grey market with 35 rupees change in the dollar price that we have seen. So all these aspects do showcase to the world that we are serious about illegal, illicit activities. We are serious about being with the IMF. But what we are really looking for in the next 5 years is a program of investment for multinationals, for sovereign wealth funds, especially China. We stick with them, the CPEC too. And I think also we have mentioned internationally that we are engaged with China, whether there is a debt reprofiling that is needed or new investments that have come to Pakistan. So again, a broad-based investment, opportunity Pakistan wants to sell to the world. These things are not easy. I think the 28 projects are being mentioned. That is the kind of a network that we are trying to showcase to the world. Good enough. It will take time, but what we want to really see is something on ground happening. I think agriculture is something that we are moving forward. We are expecting in the ballpark of $5 to $6 billion in the coming years in the agriculture sector as well, from the Middle East, trying to fulfill their food security. So there is a large array of activities that have started to be pushed. Of course, these are not easy things to be done. Pakistan's state apparatus is clogged. Even the Saudi investors have mentioned that to our authorities. The bypass is SIFC. I think he mentioned that in his address. So that is the seriousness we want to take this forward. So all in all, I really hope that we can, we have a lot of hard work to do, whether it's with the IMF, whether it's, sorting out the illicit activities, whether it's trying to showcase Pakistan as an investment hub. And in this kind of atmosphere, it is not easy. There is another circle.
I'm glad that you're talking about what needs to be done. But I was thinking that whenever we talk about, attracting, some kind of investment in the country, we end up talking either about the developed world or the rich world, including Middle East. But the world is far bigger, and there are many up and coming countries there as well. Because the UN itself is a world body, and at UNGA you not only talk to the developed countries, but all countries that might be interested in investing elsewhere. Do you think that it was a good opportunity and it was well exploited by the Prime Minister in Pakistan by showcasing all these issues at the UN?
And Dr. Saab, I just want to add that if this is so, that we as a country are going to be in future at least at a smaller level breadbasket of the GCC countries, wouldn't it be right time that Pakistan should be bidding for GCC plus, Pakistan being a plus?
So on the first part, Pitafi Saab, you have to remember that the sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East are awash with money. I read an article the other day in Wall Street where they're saying they're going to be the biggest investors in the world. The oil price is, Arab Light is $100. It's higher than the Brent and the WTI price, which is $92 and $95. So they're awash with money, and oil is likely to stay on the higher levels. They are going to be probably our best bet in terms of investment. So the Middle East all through. Then I still think that the CPEC 2 is not a gone cause. We did CPEC 1 where we got the infrastructure investment. So the second part, of course, we need to complete the CPEC 2 because we have the 41,000 megawatt of electricity in the country, right? Now we need to export something with it to earn dollars to pay up the kind of infrastructure investment that has come, or the 2,000 billion rupees that we talk about, that capex that we need to pay in terms of the power bills that we are finding hard to do. Then across the board, of course, regional trade, regional investments, that's another thing. We are talking about pipelines within the area. That's something we should do. It's been years since we've been talking about TAPI, so I really hope we can move forward on that so that the natural resources around us, which benefit us, can flow to Pakistan as well. But in the meantime, I think the transition Pakistan has to start thinking about in terms of the energy is that how will we move in terms of green energy, where we have the water reserves, we have the plenty of sun in the country and plenty of wind tunnels. So that's the other thing that we have to start thinking about. And that's, again, work that we have to do and then showcase to the world that, we are serious about doing these kind of reforms in the country where our dependency goes away into the future as we look in 2030, 35, 10, 15 years down the road from fossil fuels and especially imported energy. So I think that's the overall atmosphere. That's the overall kind of ball game that Pakistan must make on its own. And I think one of the other things that was mentioned in the address was also about how we want to tax our people. Because, the MD of the IMF, when she met, there's a clip that became very viral where she says, you need to tax your own high-income earners. And we've always talked about this, real estate, the challenge in retail, the challenge in wholesale, the challenge in high-income earner groups, the compliance challenge, the agriculture income tax challenge. So that's, again, a challenge for us to solve. And I really hope that the incoming government in the next 5 years will take these challenges very seriously because that is showcasing to the world that we are getting our own house in order. And then, of course, our own domestic investor excited as well. Always remember that monies are there with people. When we say that 8,500 billion rupees is the cash that exists in the country, that does exist in the country, right? People are holding on to that cash or dollars or gold. We want those people to get those monies out and come and invest in Pakistan as well. So I think somehow if we can show a virtuous cycle in any of these areas and showcase one, for example, privatization or one big investment besides Recordec, and I keep saying Recordec is now a very functional investment in Pakistan. In 2028, I want to see the first copper, come out of there, go abroad, we sell that, we earn a foreign exchange. So we, put ourselves on the map where we are doing minerals export from Pakistan. So I think that's the overall scenario in which I see.
Right, and Dr. Haqqan, please answer Faisal's question because he's very eager to hear your perspective on that. He won't let you go without it.
Yeah.
Sorry, could you repeat that question? I was so involved with the Pakistan. Yeah.
Dr. Saab, I was asking, of course, Pakistan is seeking FDI, and of course we are seeking FDI in the agriculture sector as well. Now, when we are supposed to be at least a smaller level breadbasket of the GCC countries, wouldn't it be, better that we bid for GCC plus, Pakistan being the plus?
So let me say this. In terms of the food security, we need to secure our own food security. We need to have a trading link with the Middle East. Our exports in terms of all the food to Middle East is very, very little compared to what their need is. I think it's less than, it's a very, very small amount. And so we must become, Middle East plus. We must find a linkage, regional trade and trade to the Middle East in terms of the food security, guaranteeing our own food security. We import $10 billion of food items into the country. Our own agriculture produce and productivity is at a very low level. So again, picking all those up, another initiative that the country has started, and I hope to learn more about it, is that Land Information Management Systems initiative. Now, that is primarily going to the farmer and improving his or her yield. Of the 95% farmers, 5% big ones are doing still much better in Pakistan. It is the 95% smaller holdings which appear to be the problem in terms of the seed, the mechanization, the financing, the technology, the water, the way they use it. So one really hopes that we can get to those 95%. And then, of course, be an exporter to the Middle East, become the Middle East plus, as you are rightly saying, and cut our own food import of the $10 billion so that our external account gets more settled as we move into the next year or so.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Haqqani, for joining us and sharing your views with us. We're also going to be, of course, taking a look at what the Prime Minister spoke about regarding a very important aspect of Islamophobia, something that Pakistan has also been at the forefront of last year as well. So let's take a look at what the PM had to say, and then we'll discuss it in detail.
We need to cherish and celebrate our diversity and different ways of life, mutual respect, sanctity of religious symbols, scriptures, and personage should be ensured. While Islamophobia is an age-old phenomenon, however, after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, it has assumed epidemic proportions. Last year, this Assembly adopted a resolution proposed by Pakistan on behalf of the OIC, declaring 15th March as the International Day to combat Islamophobia. Earlier this year, the Human Rights Council adopted an OIC resolution submitted by Pakistan urging states to outlaw the burning of the Holy Quran and similar provocations.
Well, you heard what the Prime Minister had to say, and Dr. Jamil, I want to take your opinion on this, because Islamophobia, of course, is a very important issue, not just for Pakistan, but for the entire Muslim Ummah. And the OIC countries, of course, have also backed Pakistan's stance on this. And there was the resolution, of course, also that has been able to be passed because of these efforts. But I want to know then, even when we talk about this issue, do you think that there is enough unified stance to address this in a proper manner, to be able to bring forth a way forward on which everyone agrees, the entire Muslim community agrees and understands, and there is that collective way in which we are able to prevent and respond to instances of Islamophobia? Do you think that that sort of understanding exists before we are able to then communicate the same to countries outside of the Muslim world?
Well, this understanding started building up from last year onward, and it was the OIC platform from where the resolution was moved. It was then passed, and it has become, they also celebrate World Islamophobia Day. So that was a move in the right direction, and a speech of Prime Minister in the General Assembly that has further augmented that very logic which was advanced by the OIC's platform. But then basically it's the Muslim community. This is a beneficial for all the communities, as a matter of fact. The more it grows, the more it attracts, and this is what Prime Minister also indicated, the more it grows, some Islamophobia feeling, and the more it is translated into action and reaction, it gives birth to the extremism. This is what Prime Minister said during his speech. So in order to address that, it's for all the communities. It is quite important to really address this issue. And he also mentioned the narrative of Islamophobia that leads to the crash of civilization, which is quite serious point which he has raised. And in order to avert that, it is important to address this very cause of extremism, and which is indicated Islamophobia. And he also gave a solution. Prime Minister gave a solution and emphasized that we should have the multilateralism. And unless we have the multilateralism, probably we will keep having this kind of issue and problems. Words to that fact, he did try and resonate that point. So it is basically what he said was that why it is not happening in its full spirit is that there is a strategic interest of certain big powers because of which it is not being controlled properly. So he has encompassed the points which, in fact, was also indicated by Iranian president and Turkish president and some of the more leaders of the Islamic world. But the proper platform of addressing such issues is already there. That is the OIC. And OIC, if they had invoked their Article 8 and 9, Article 8 is the 3-yearly head of state summit. And if they pass a resolution in that, they can always achieve their goal because it is a very huge platform of 57 members, 56 plus 1. So I think anything which they pass it in terms of resolution under the summit which is convened in Article 8, or if OIC becomes more serious about it, they can even convene the emergency meeting, extraordinary meeting under Article 9 of the OIC Charter, and that could have even a better impact. But we can only hope that because in diplomacy, it is a name of consistency and continuity. If it goes with the same consistency and with the same continuity, it has to yield some result. One more point, which is our weakness, that Prime Minister level, at the General Assembly level, which is the highest platform where you can dilate upon your foreign policy and your other policies. But then there are a whole lot of departments which have to follow it up in those respective countries, in our case, Pakistan. So now all missions and all departments of the government have to support this, our missions abroad, basically, to really follow this point up and to go to the universities, to get media, go to
right, absolutely.
Dr. Jamil, you have rightly pointed out, and here the question I had in my mind is that, of course, you have highlighted platforms like OIC, and of course, United Nations itself is a platform that is, globally outreached. Can we say that we had to make a distinction between communal violence and Islamophobia when it comes to India, and whatever we have been highlighting so far about India and the world has been obviously perceiving that whatever is taking place in India, it is all about communal violence. Rather, it should have been highlighted that it is Islamophobia which is at full swing when it comes to India. Dr. Jamil.
Yes, Ambassador, please continue. Right, I think we're unable to connect with Dr. Jamil, so we're unable to take that, but I'm sure Farrukh will be very pleased to answer your question. But add to that, Farrukh, my own question as well. When we take a look at Islamophobia, and I understand that this is something that we're trying to present in terms of the way a certain number of people are targeted or a certain religion is targeted, but I want to know whether or not Islamophobia as a term or as the way we understand it has the maybe unintended impact of limiting it to just the Muslim world or just religious Islam, whereas in its essence it is just to sort of take away and eliminate any sort of bias or intolerance towards any one particular religion.
Right, Sana, I think that it is not any more limiting than terms like anti-Semitism. Actually, frankly speaking, Islamophobia is a natural successor of anti-Semitism. Why? Because especially all our roots connect to Judaism, right? Because all our prophets and all our ethos actually, ours and Christianity's, right? All Abrahamic faiths actually trace their origin back to Judaism. So there is that element also, especially now what Faisal was saying, India and India's Hindutva extremists, they have now connected with neo-Nazis in the West. So their attitude actually culminates into this new kind of hatred that is important to remember. But there is another aspect that you have to remember, Sana. When this bill was moved, this resolution was moved against Islamophobia, at that time, the government in Pakistan, especially because of its ideological complexion, kept on focusing mainly on one thing, that is Islamic symbols, right? The biggest problem is that Islamic symbols are important and there have been bans. For example, in France, we have seen, first we saw burkini being banned, and now we know that in schools they have banned hijab. But then there is also Egypt, where similar kind of ban has been imposed in schools as well, right? India has similarly also applied the same kind of curtailment. So that is one aspect of it. But symbols don't have flesh. Symbols don't feel pain, right? In the past 22 years, since the start of war on terror, what we have seen is the systematic isolation and alienation of Muslim communities all over the world. For example, in UK, a few years ago, there were letters that were distributed celebrating a day called Slap a Muslim Day, right? Inviting people to slap a Muslim there as well. So with that kind of hatred, especially remember, when you talk about anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism merely does not talk about faith, right? But also the identity, the cultural identity of Judaism as well. Similarly, when you talk about Islam, there are people who are in the West who want to integrate, who actually want to become very practical, functional part of that society, but because of their names, Muslim names, cultural names, and then also because of the complexion of their skin, they are isolated, they are ostracized. We have to actually take all those things into perspective, and then we have to fight it. How do you do it? You have to start a kind of dialogue with all the communities, and I think there my biggest concern is that while you can actually highlight these issues at such important fora, the response to these issues will not essentially be state-oriented, but people-oriented.
Right.
In India, what Faisal was saying, I think in India they have really weaponized hatred because of their own reasons. India has this mortal fear of its own lower castes because they think that they are essentially in majority, and if they start asserting themselves, like India has just actually removed two words from its constitution, secularism and socialism. Why? Because they are afraid that if lower caste people actually get equal rights, then they won't have the kind of sway on the policy. So what they do is they use othering of Muslims to unite Hindus, and it is called Hindu consolidation, and through that they actually keep on ruling. But because Indian community is now very powerful, and now India keeps on exporting new people to all over the world, these biases are also making their way. You have seen what happened to a Sikh leader.
Yeah.
You will keep on seeing that similar kind of things might happen to Muslims all over the world as well. So be warned. It is high time, what Faisal said, we have to take cognizance of that.
Right, absolutely. And thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for sharing your views on a number of issues that have been raised by the Prime Minister today at the UNGA. And of course, we are really happy to hear that the regional and global issues of concern were taken note of, and that he was able to present successfully Pakistan's stance on various policy issues. And this is important, especially in terms of the impact that it will create, and then of course the way that Pakistan wants to set its own directions in relation to other countries as well. So we're going to be keeping on discussing, of course, various aspects of the impact that this will have, especially on climate change at the upcoming COP28 2028 and other policy issues as well. But so far, the UNGA Assembly session seems to be something that has added to Pakistan's stance and perspective being better understood. And of course, we owe that to the caretaker Prime Minister to be able to present that successfully at this platform. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll now see you on Monday.